All right, everybody. So here is one of the issues that we can have with hormone replacement therapy when we are using exogenous forms of hormones. Exogenous meaning that it comes from outside of our body. And so endogenous hormones are going to be the testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, estrone that you make. Exogenous are going to be the ones that we give you in some supplemental form, whether that's a cream or a troche or an injection or a pellet, anything like that. Okay, those are exogenous, they come from outside. So when we give exogenous hormones, there is a possibility that we are going to raise your levels up into what is considered supraphysiological range. That essentially means levels higher than what we naturally see in nature. Now, for some patients, this doesn't seem to be an issue. And what I believe is happening and what the current research is suggesting is that we are getting a down regulation of potentially some of the receptors. And so the blood levels, even though they say they're high, the body actually compensates for that by altering the concentration of receptors for that hormone, and that can therefore effectively change how much the hormone is impacting human physiology. However, for a lot of patients, when we go into the supraphysiological range of those hormones, we do start to see a suppression, if not an almost complete elimination of natural production of that hormone. And so one of the most clear examples we can give of that is men and women who use anabolic steroids. So when they use anabolic steroids, it's easy for us to talk about a man. When a man uses anabolic steroids, his levels of androgens go up so high that his brain registers that, therefore shutting off LH and FSH production, which are the hormone messengers that come from the brain that go down to the testes and tell the testes to either make sperm and or testosterone. And so those plummet, LH and FSH plummet to near zero. When that happens, the testes are not getting the message from the brain to make its own testosterone and to create more sperm. And so that's why we can see some fertility issues with anabolic steroids and things like that, because FSH is dropping to basically nothing. And we do also get a basically elimination or a major suppression of endogenous testosterone production. Now, this can be an issue because obviously when we come off of the anabolic steroids, the man is going to have a hard time with the testes coming back online. And so that's where a post-cycle therapy can come into play, using things like clomiphene or HCG, which are going to help reset the system for the brain and the testes in order to make more endogenous hormones. Now, putting the anabolic steroids to the side, when we even look at testosterone replacement therapy in men, there is still potential for that suppression to happen. And it's because we can push the testosterone levels into a supraphysiological range. Now, there is no real once you get above 1500 nanograms per deciliter, you are going to see suppression. It's not as clear cut in that. It's not a percentage increase. Each individual is going to be unique, but I will probably say that in a male, it occurs around the 1200 to 1600 nanograms per deciliter, depending on a lot of different variable factors. And in women, again, we're going to be on the high end of the range for them as well, where we're going to start to see this. And so if we get into that supraphysiological range, there is the possibility that the testes and the ovaries are going to dramatically decrease their endogenous production of testosterone, which can be an issue for long-term health. It may not be a huge issue for short-term periods. However, if we have basically testicular or ovarian, so basically gonadal hypofunctioning because of supraphysiological exogenous hormones, that can be an issue if it persists long term. Now, if I have a patient who comes back to me, and it's easier to talk about men, so let's talk about men for a second. If a man comes back to me and we are doing testosterone replacement therapy, it comes back and his testosterone is around 1,000 nanograms per deciliter and he feels phenomenal, but he has testicular suppression, meaning his LH and FSH are barely detectable per the lab's limit of detection. The approach that I'm going to take in that scenario is I actually want to scale back on the exogenous testosterone and add in some supportive, basically clomiphene or HCG, and I actually prefer I prefer HCG over clomiphene. But I add that back in because what I want to do is I want the patient to feel good around that 1,000 nanograms per deciliter, but I don't want him to just rely on the exogenous testosterone to be there. I would rather have a mix between exogenous and endogenous and keep him at around that 1,000 where he feels great, just not have that testicular suppression. So recapping this, we can get gonadal suppression with too much hormones in the blood, even if we're not dealing with the anabolic steroids. It's important to recognize this because we don't want that suppression for long term, because that may impact long term basically sex steroid synthesis, and we don't want to have to keep someone on high dose exogenous steroids for an extended period of time. I hope that helped give you some insight into how I approach working with both men and women for hormone replacement therapy. Please drop a comment below and let me know what you learned, and I will see you later.